I've driven for one of the rideshare apps for almost 3 years now, mostly nights, because the surge pricing after midnight makes it worth staying out later than my day job would ever pay for. I know my city's late-night patterns pretty well at this point. Bar close brings a wave of short, easy trips. After 2 a.m., things thin out, and the fares that are left tend to be longer, quieter rides. People heading home from somewhere they don't talk much about. Most nights are boring in a good way. I've got a system. I keep a water bottle in the cup holder, a phone mount on the vent, and I don't take a fare more than 30 minutes out unless the pay bumps for it. That last rule is the only reason this next part happened at all, because on a slow Tuesday, a fare came through offering almost triple the normal rate for a drop-off about 25 minutes outside town. I picked up my passenger from a strip mall parking lot alone, standing near a closed nail salon. He got in the back, gave a quiet hello, and didn't say much else. That part wasn't unusual. Plenty of people don't want small talk at 3 in the morning. The address was already loaded from the app. Some road I didn't recognize out past the last real subdivision on that side of town, so I just followed the GPS and let the quiet sit there. About 15 minutes in, the road stopped having streetlights, then stopped having other cars, then started narrowing down to a single lane with trees close on both sides. The GPS still showed a steady line toward the destination, no rerouting, no signal drop. So I kept following it, even as the last bit of town lit up behind me in the mirror and disappeared. I've driven plenty of rural drop-offs before, so none of that bothered me on its own. What I noticed, somewhere around the 20-minute mark, was that my passenger hadn't touched his phone once. No texting, no scrolling, nothing to fill the time. Every time I glanced at the mirror, he was just looking straight ahead, at the back of my seat. The GPS pin finally landed on a house set back from the road. No other houses near it that I could see. No lights on, except a single porch light glowing yellow above the front steps. I pulled into the gravel driveway and my passenger paid in cash before the app even prompted for it, which the app doesn't usually allow unless you've set it up that way in advance. He thanked me, quiet as before, and got out. I stayed put for a few seconds, the way I usually do until a passenger's actually inside somewhere. Mostly out of habit more than any real concern. I watched him walk up the 2 front steps toward the porch light. And that's when I noticed the thing I still can't make sense of. The porch light was mounted directly above where a door should have been, centered on the frame, the way it always is on a house like that. But there wasn't a door under it. Just wall, painted the same white as the rest of the front, with the door frame outline still visible in the paint like something had been removed or bricked over without repainting properly. My passenger walked straight toward that blank stretch of wall, and I lost sight of exactly what happened next. Because in the second it took me to process what I was looking at, he was already gone from view, and the porch light clicked off on its own like a motion sensor resetting. I didn't wait to figure out anything else. I backed out of that driveway faster than I should have on gravel, and I didn't slow down again until I hit the first street light back on the main road. When I got home that night, I couldn't stop thinking about the door frame, so I pulled up the address on satellite view myself, on my own laptop at my own kitchen table. The lot was there, the house was there, same shape, same roof line as what I'd seen, but the satellite image dated barely 2 months old, showed the whole front porch section boarded over with plywood, a permit notice taped to the wall, and no vehicles, no signs of anyone living there at all. I don't drive that stretch of road anymore, not even for surge pricing, and I've started declining any fare where the pickup or drop-off doesn't show a name attached to the account, no matter how good the offer looks on my screen. I take Rideshare home most Friday nights after closing shift at the restaurant, because by the time I'm out, it's almost 1 in the morning and the buses have already stopped running. It's a 15-minute ride if traffic's clear, and I've done it enough times that I barely think about it anymore. I always share my trip status with my roommate before I get in, more out of habit at this point than any real worry, the same way you'd text someone you landed safely. This particular driver picked me up outside the restaurant in an ordinary sedan. Nothing that stood out. 5 stars on the app. A few hundred rides logged. He was polite when I got in, asked how my night went. The normal small talk you'd expect. I answered, said something about being tired, and settled into my usual half-scrolling on my phone routine for the ride home. A few minutes in, I noticed he'd say something under his breath every so often. Too quiet for me to catch the words, always angled slightly toward the empty passenger seat next to him rather than toward me in the back. I told myself he probably had a hands-free call going through his earpiece, since plenty of drivers take calls mid-shift, and I went back to my phone without thinking much more about it. He kept doing it, though, at almost exactly the same interval each time, like a habit rather than a conversation. And there was never a response on his end, never a pause, where someone else would have been talking back. I started actually watching the route on my phone's map instead of just half paying attention. And that's when I noticed we'd passed the turn for my street about a minute earlier without him slowing down. I checked the map again to make sure I wasn't overreacting, and the little blue arrow marking the car was already 2 blocks past my street. Still moving straight, no turn signal, no slowing down. My stomach did something I don't have a good way to describe, somewhere between a drop and a lurch, and I sat up straighter in my seat without really deciding to. I said something, kept my voice casual, just, "Hey, I think you missed the turn back there." He didn't answer right away. Then, still facing forward, he repeated a phrase back to me, one I recognized because I typed it into a text to my roommate not even 90 seconds earlier when I'd shared my trip status. My exact words in his voice, word for word, about being tired and ready to be home. I hadn't said any of that out loud in the car. I'd only typed it. I didn't wait to figure out how he'd know that. We were coming up on a red light, and the second the car slowed for it, I already had my hand on the door handle. I got out at the intersection, said something about this being fine, and walked fast toward the gas station on the corner, the kind with bright lights and a clerk visible through the window, not looking back until I was actually inside under the fluorescent lights with people around me. I called my roommate from there, hands still not quite steady, and had them come pick me up instead. It wasn't until the next morning, once I'd calmed down enough to actually think about it, that I opened the app to look at the trip and figure out who the driver even was, in case I needed to report it. There was no trip listed, not canceled, not completed, nothing in my ride history for that night at all, even though my bank app showed the charge had gone through at 1:04 a.m., the exact time I would have been getting in that car. I called the rideshare company's support line and read them the charge amount and timestamp directly off my bank statement. They pulled up their own records and told me, after putting me on hold twice, that no trip matching that charge or timestamp existed anywhere in their system under my account, and that they'd be issuing a refund for a transaction they couldn't otherwise explain. I still take rideshare home most Fridays because I don't have another way back at that hour, but I don't scroll my phone in the car anymore, and I don't type anything to my roommate until I'm already out and standing on my own front step. I drive overnight shifts for one of the rideshare apps, mostly because I can't sleep on a normal schedule anyway, and the money's better once the bars close. Most of my pickups are exactly what you'd expect at that hour. People leaving work, people leaving parties, the occasional drunk guy who wants to talk your ear off the whole ride. Nothing about the job usually surprises me anymore. About 2 months ago, I started getting a specific pickup request every so often, maybe once a week, always between 3 and 4 in the morning. Same rider profile every time, no photo, a name that was just a single letter, and a pickup pin that sat directly on the shoulder of the highway that runs along the edge of town, nowhere near an exit, a business, or anything else that would explain someone standing there. I declined it the first few times without thinking twice. Plenty of pins are slightly off from someone's actual location, and a highway shoulder request at that hour isn't something I wanted to deal with anyway. I mentioned it once to another driver at a gas station, just making conversation while we both filled up before a shift, and he said he'd gotten the exact same request a few times himself. Same single letter name, same stretch of highway. He said he'd never accepted it either, and when I asked why, he just shrugged and said some fares aren't worth the gas money, no matter what they're offering. I laughed it off at the time, since I figured every driver in this city probably shares a few of these pins if they cover the same overnight routes. The fourth time it came through for me, I was almost out of gas money for the week and hadn't had a fare in over 40 minutes. So I accepted it, mostly out of not wanting to drive home empty for the night. The GPS took me exactly where I expected. A straight stretch of highway, with no shoulder lighting, trees on one side and a drainage ditch on the other. I slowed down, looking for someone, headlights barely cutting through how dark it was out there, and about a quarter mile before I even reached the pin, my headlights caught a figure standing at the very edge of the road, facing away from me, not moving. I want to be clear about what happened next, because I've gone over it more times than I can count. I was still slowing down, still a good distance out, and then that figure was standing directly beside my driver's side window, level with the glass, as if it had covered that quarter mile in the time it took me to blink. I didn't think, I didn't roll the window down, I didn't ask if that was my rider. I just put the car in drive and hit the gas hard enough that my tires actually caught gravel off the shoulder for a second before finding pavement. I checked my mirror once, just once, because some instinct made me need to know if anyone was behind me on the road. The figure was still there in the mirror, exactly parallel to my car, matching my speed, with no visible legs moving, no car of its own, just keeping pace at the edge of my headlights' reach for 2, maybe 3 seconds before the road curved, and it was gone from view entirely. I didn't slow back down until I saw the first gas station sign lit up almost 10 minutes later, and I sat in that parking lot with the engine running for a long time before I trusted myself to drive the rest of the way home. I deleted that rider's profile from my recent trips that same night and blocked the account through the app's safety settings, the same tools they give you for an actual harassing passenger, even though I couldn't have explained to anyone what I was reporting if they'd asked. The request hasn't come through since, and I've stopped accepting any fare where the pickup pin sits on an open stretch of highway with nothing else around it, no matter how long I've been sitting empty or how good the fare looks.